Michael Kirkbride, also referred to as just Kirkbride or simply as MK, is one of the most well-known and widely discussed writers and artists for the Elder Scrolls series and its lore.
Michael Kirkbride. Yeah. Fuck you times 3.
Many people attribute the mystique and uniqueness of the Elder Scrolls universe to Kirkbride, and he's commonly thought of as strange and eccentric by many.
He had a giant fucking boner for his uncle, you know?
He's mostly well known for his large contributions to the lore of multiple Elder Scrolls games over the years.
Like Morehouse, like he's fucking excited to fight, and he's got a boner.
But who is he? Hi everyone, I'm Azura. I'm just some random person who loves the Elder Scrolls, has a YouTube channel, and has incredibly mediocre video editing skills. You might be wondering why I'm making a video on Michael Kirkbride today, as he is still a very much active participant in the community surrounding Elder Scrolls lore, and this is because the story of Michael Kirkbride is truly a curious case. My hair is frizzy today. It's very frizzy. Yeah. Where could this man with such unique and outlandish ideas and inspiration have ended up now? Well, let's find out. Let's start at the beginning. Michael Kirkbride was born on September 1st, 1972, presumably somewhere in America, but I couldn't find much information on his early life. He studied creative writing, painting, and comparative religion at the University of Alabama in his early adulthood. Kirkbride claims that he lucked out when getting into video games, as he began to work on some games with friends from college. His very first credited game was for art and graphics in Bethesda's 1996 MS-DOS release of Skynet, a Doom-like Terminator-themed shooter. To quote Kirkbride on his experience directly, he said, "I was 22 when I joined Bethesda Softworks. I was hired by Mark Jones after sending in a floppy disk containing some images I created using Deluxe Painter 2, which I lied and said I created in Photoshop. Oh, right, and I sent the above via the post office, promptly after seeing that the company was hiring via a print magazine known as Next Generation." He added, "He liked my Photoshop images on the floppy and wanted to know if I would, yes, which is what I said before I actually heard him ask, create some menus for our Terminator games multiplayer add-on, which just garnered some more dumb fucking yellings of yeses until I was on a plane for an on-site interview and boom, I'm pushing around a ramp of 256 colors to the front-end menu for Skynet." Aside from Bethesda, in his early days, Kirkbride was also credited for some work on the 1997 MS-DOS release, Amulets and Armor, which allegedly sold less than 100 copies and eventually became abandonware, only to be rediscovered in recent years. He's also credited for contributions to other games such as Defender, released in 2002, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King from 2003, Lord of the Rings: The Third Age from 2004, Shrek the Third from 2007, and Iron Man from 2008, along with a few others in recent years, but we will get to that. The first Elder Scrolls game that Kirkbride worked on was Daggerfall. He had a minor role working on textures for the game. In his own words, he said, "My first job on Elder Scrolls Daggerfall was to tweak all these real-world paintings that they scanned in, and hide the fact that they weren't real-world paintings so no one would get sued." Michael Kirkbride wasn't a huge fan of Daggerfall or the universe at first. He said, "I wasn't having anything to do with this dummy Elder Scrolls world." Until Kirk got promoted, and Ken got hired, and then Julian left and Todd frowned and went, "Hey, Kurt and Michael, what was this pirate game that you guys were talking about again?" His first major role was design and writing for The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, released in 1998. This was a huge turning point for the in-game universe, as Kirkbride, in addition to Kurt Coleman, started the entire redesign of Elder Scrolls lore as we know it today. Before we move on any further, I do want to clarify that the popular belief that Michael Kirkbride is the genius behind the lore is almost entirely incorrect. While he is definitely one of the driving forces behind the weirdness of the universe, there are many other writers and designers who deserve equal credit in regards to this as well. Kurt Coleman, as I just mentioned, is also one of the many contributors to the series, along with Julian LaFay, Ted Peterson, and Vijay Lakshman, who are considered the forefathers of the Elder Scrolls series. Ken Rolston and Todd Howard can also be credited as large contributors to the universe, along with many other people who have been involved with the writing over the years. However, I don't want to downplay Kirkbride's influence on the franchise either, as Ken Rolston said, "The look of Morrowind came from Michael Kirkbride, and I would say that it's not just the visual aesthetic. All of the narrative aesthetic of Morrowind also comes from Michael. I might have been the narrative lead, but Michael was the luminary, the man with spectacularly exotic and bad judgment that excited us so much. He was absolutely essential." I just wanted to point out that it's grossly incorrect that many people hold the assumption that Kirkbride is the main driving force behind the lore, while many other writers get shafted. I will touch on why this might be the case soon. Kirkbride's most well-known work comes from the best Elder Scrolls game to exist, Oblivion.
How are you?
Been better. How about you?
Not bad.
Good to hear. Goodbye.
As you're all aware, he is most well known for the major role he had on the actual best Elder Scrolls game to exist, Morrowind. This achievement seemed to have almost made Kirkbride a household name. I mean, maybe if your family is as obsessed with Elder Scrolls lore as you are, and I mean, well, aren't you lucky? His work for Morrowind included game design, writing, and art, and his most famous contribution to the game was the book series, The 36 Lessons of Vivec. Kirkbride's artistic vision has made a huge impact on the visual appearance of Morrowind, and if you've been a fan of the Elder Scrolls for almost any amount of time, you've probably seen his concept artwork posted at least somewhere on the internet, or maybe even in a meme. Kirkbride actually departed Bethesda Softworks mid-2002 and moved to California to join ZeniMax's eNexus Studios, also known as Bethesda West. However, this did not stop him from contributing to the Elder Scrolls for the next few years, as the team in Maryland were very close with him. During this time, he was contracted to write 53 lore books for Morrowind, including the aforementioned 36 Lessons of Vivec, along with Varieties of Faith, The Monomyth, and many more. Originally, the 36 Lessons of Vivec were only supposed to be a 6-book series, however, Kirkbride stated that he just could not stop writing them, resulting to 36 in total. When production for Oblivion started, Kirkbride was contacted once again to work on some lore books for the game, along with writing Mankar Camoran's dialogue for the main quest. He also did some writing for the Knights of the Nine DLC as well, including the Song of Pelennor book series. Michael Kirkbride said that he struggled having less freedom with the writing for Oblivion as he'd had with Redguard or Morrowind, and he actually didn't play the game for years after it was released. Originally, he had hoped the game would be scrapped, but eventually admitted that he thought it was rad. Kirkbride continued to work on the Elder Scrolls with the release of Skyrim, however he had much less involvement in this compared to previous games. He was involved in early plot concepts and acted as a consultant to the developers. He also wrote the announcement trailer for Skyrim as well. Kirkbride did not seem to be involved with writing any new lore books for the game, and he actually expressed disappointment towards the removal of some lore, including the Nordic religion and some aspects of the Dragon War, but he seems to have enjoyed Skyrim overall. The last in-game appearance that Michael Kirkbride's work has had was in the Elder Scrolls Online. He wrote a lore book for the Morrowind chapter released in 2017. This text was titled The 36 Lessons of Vivec, Sermon 37. The edition of this lore book has been very divisive over the years, with fans of the lore arguing back and forth whether this book is canon or merely just an Easter egg. Easter eggs in the Elder Scrolls are like a whole other beast that should probably be covered in another video, however, for the time being, let's just simplify this argument for now. Multiple developers have stated over the years that everything in the officially licensed releases of the Elder Scrolls franchise by Bethesda and ZeniMax is considered canon. However, to quote Tori Daughtery, one of the writers and designers for ESO, she said, "Elder Scrolls lore is so big and so mysterious and up for interpretation of all kinds, so I don't really know if anything in the game can really be called canon unless the player sees it happen." And speaking of canon, Michael Kirkbride has always been very involved with the Elder Scrolls community over the years and would answer many fans' questions online as well as release out-of-universe works. He's been the largest contributor out of all of the writers to provide out-of-game lore for the community. I believe this close relationship has heavily contributed to the idea that Michael Kirkbride is the one behind the lore, like I mentioned before. Other writers over the years have not had such a public presence, except maybe for the lore masters for ESO, Lawrence Schick, Lehman Tootle, and then the current lore master, Michael Zenke. However, the interaction that the ESO lore masters have had with the community pales in comparison to what Michael Kirkbride has done over the years. Kirkbride has been discussing lore and answering questions from the community as early as 1999. Over the years, he's participated in many discussions on the now defunct Elder Scrolls forums, Facebook, Tumblr, Reddit, and the Imperial Library. Typically, these interactions would clarify or expand on the lore, and sometimes answers were still somewhat cryptic or made in jest. For example, upon being asked the pronunciation of the word Sijic, his response was, "It's pronounced dumb name." Man, maybe I should say it like that then, if that's the pronunciation. I don't know. When someone asked for clarification on sexual dimorphism within Bosmer, he responded with, "Because Bosmer represent the idea that women are always beautiful and men are always short, ugly, trollish creatures. It's true. Look, just face it, women rock, men are creepy." Michael's interaction with the community were always very playful and insightful, however, there's always been a question looming over people's heads. Is everything he writes canon? After leaving Bethesda, some people have questioned whether the lore he writes out of universe should be taken seriously or not. Some people hate him for this, some people love him. It has been one of the things that Elder Scrolls lore buffs have argued about for years. One of the most divisive out-of-universe writings that he has published is Coda.
Coda fans, I'm ashamed of you.
I don't even know where to start with Coda, really. Like, if you haven't read it yourself, I strongly urge you to go check it out because it really is something you need to experience firsthand. And don't take this as me promoting it, I just think whether you agree with it or not, it's worth the read. I'm going to rely on the explanation from UESP for this one because even after reading it twice myself, I still don't think I could fully explain it. According to UESP, Coda is an unofficial graphic novel written by Michael Kirkbride and was to be illustrated by various artists. While the graphic novel was not produced in full, its script and some artwork was released on the 14th of February 2014. Set on Massor in a post-apocalyptic 5th era, Coda tells the story of the death and rebirth of the world through the eyes of Jubal and Sol, a Dunmar tasked with killing a Numidium which caused the destruction of Nirn. Described as the last Morrowind story, Coda is a conclusion to wider narratives that Kirkbride introduced in the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind and expanded on in further writings. As a work of metafiction, Coda regularly breaks the fourth wall, such as with figures called the Digitals, giant hands that interact with characters from outside of the comics panels, and an embedded narrative section depicted in the form of a superhero comic. Coda has always been divisive because, firstly, it's so insanely different to the fundamental Elder Scrolls lore that we see in the games, but it's also because it was meant to be divisive. The overarching premise of Coda and other works Kirkbride has produced over the years has always challenged the idea of what is canon because, to put it simply, everything and nothing is canon. The Elder Scrolls lore has no bearing on the corporate designation of canon. Kirkbride has claimed that the Elder Scrolls universe is like an open source code, essentially allowing the player to do whatever they want with it. And if you want to put Miku in your world and have her be canon, then fucking be my guest.
I tell you that Dragonborn comes.
Michael Kirkbride, and to the extent of the Elder Scrolls universe as a whole, has always leaned into the unreliable narrator phenomena, in which there will be conflicting information almost intentionally placed into the world. This seems to be one of the pillars that Kirkbride's lore stands on. It is implied that some developers at Bethesda and ZeniMax approve of this idea, however not quite openly. There have been subtle nods to Kirkbride within the game, such as the addition of Vivek's antlers in ESO, referencing Kirkbride's online aliases, Vek and Mary Isor the Elk. When the previous lore master of ESO, Lawrence Schick, was asked about Coda, he said, "It was thought-provoking and a hell of a lot of fun, but we don't really touch much on that sort of meta lore." Another point of contention within the argument of Coda's canon status is the aforementioned lore book, the 36 Lessons of Vivek, Sermon 37, which was the lore book Kirkbride wrote for ESO. A passage within the book states, Go here, world without wheel, charting 0 deaths, and echo singing. If you read between the lines, this passage tells you to visit www.coda.es, which is where the story of Coda is hosted. Again, we loop back to that whole argument of Easter egg versus canon. However, I feel like that argument can be defeated by what we've already talked about. Anything can be canon if you want, but hey, maybe then you don't even believe that. I don't like to interject my opinions in these sort of videos, but I will just say that I'm still on the fence. I appreciate the overarching premise of Coda and the intent behind it, but some of the stuff Kirkbride writes is beyond me. We haven't even touched on the idea that some people don't even think ESO is canon, but I think that's a discussion for another day. Moving on from Coda, Kirkbride has released various other out-of-universe writings, and another popular one that comes to mind is the story of Kinmune. It was originally published in 2011 and is available to read with Kirkbride's other works on the Coda website. To put it simply, Kinmune is a time-traveling space robot AI from the 9th era who may or may not be Queen Iren, the leader of the Aldmeri Dominion in ESO. There is a lot more to it, and again, I do encourage you to read about it yourself. I just wanted to give another example of the kinds of works that Kirkbride has written out of universe, and why some people may consider them a little insane. And speaking of insanity, we have to talk about some of the influences for Kirkbride's work. Most of you have probably seen this image floating around on the web over the years of the UASP article on Kirkbride, stating that Todd Howard took this photo after he didn't show up for work for 5 days, claiming that he imbibed magic mushrooms and LSD while locked in his apartment for a week while writing the 36 Lessons of Vivek. Yeah, so it's fake. This falsified image was posted in 2018 and made its way around various websites and has been denounced by UASP, Michael Kirkbride, and his wife multiple times. Michael Kirkbride had previously stated that the 36 Lessons of Vivek were written with a week of bourbon, smokes, and solitude. The image itself was a still capture of a parody video that Michael Kirkbride had posted to YouTube in 2013, and he has stated multiple times that he's never used recreational drugs for any of his writings. Much of his inspiration over the years has come from multiple authors and pop culture. Gene Wolfe and Georges Louis Borges, I fucking have no idea how to say that, I am sorry. Their writings were a huge influence for him, and this can definitely be seen in his work. Multiple other authors, including Michael Moorcock, R. Scott Baker, are also influences in his work as well. He was also a very big fan of Dune, Star Wars, Dungeons & Dragons, David Bowie, and the works of Carl Jung. Elements of Hinduism can also be seen as an influence in his work, and he has cited the Oddworld franchise of games as a big influence for Morrowind. Another smaller known fact is that Michael Kirkbride has a condition known as synthesthesia. Synthesia. I don't know. This is where the brain will route sensory information through unrelated senses, causing someone to experience multiple senses simultaneously. Sometimes people with this condition may associate numbers with colors or sounds with shapes, but it can present in many different ways. Kirkbride has stated that he has acute sound and sight synesthesia. Oh my god, don't make me say this word again. Synesthesia. I don't fucking...
Synesthesia.
Synesthesia, are you serious? It's not even fucking spelled like that. Oh, anyways. Kirkbride has stated that he has acute sound and sight synesthesia. I still can't say it. Which has contributed largely to how he writes. This definitely explains some of the perceived bizarreness of his writings, and some people might not understand what this condition is, see his works, and then just assume that he's using drugs, but this isn't the case. So now that we know how Kirkbride rose to popularity, gained huge notoriety, and even a dedicated fan base, what happened after he stopped working with Bethesda? Well, that might not be entirely true, as he's been, contracted to do some work for Oblivion, Skyrim, and ESO, so there's still a possibility that he could be assisting with Elder Scrolls 6. So putting technicalities aside, what has Kirkbride been working on then? What kind of creative genius masterpieces could he have been creating?
Oh, great. There's Lucas and the Ocelots. The rivalry continues.
Man, they've got matching leather jackets and everything.
So cool.
Well, well, well. If it isn't the order of the losers.
Great. The fail squad's here.
Lucas,
Get a load of these losers. Let's go, guys.
Yeah, so the same guy who was partially responsible for the entire Elder Scrolls universe lore rework was also one of the designers for Telltale Games' Minecraft Story Mode.
I don't...
Now don't take this the wrong way, I am not knocking the grind, everyone's gotta put food on the table somehow, but it was just so insane to me when I found this out a few years ago. It just seemed like such a 1080? 180. You know, going from the bizarreness of the Elder Scrolls games to essentially a game targeted at kids. Kirkbride also worked on a couple other games for Telltale, the Batman games and the Walking Dead Season 4, the final season. He was the season lead designer for both of these games. This was actually pretty cool because I've always been a huge fan of the Walking Dead games from the beginning, but I will say though, from what I remember, I wasn't a huge fan of the 3rd or 4th season, but I'm not going to be leaving a review in this video. As many of you know, Telltale Games shut down in 2018, leaving 90% of their staff out of a job. Michael Kirkbride was part of the 5 final Telltale staff members who completed the final season of The Walking Dead, referred to as the Still Not Bitten team. Their efforts meant that we actually got a finale to the Walking Dead games. But after that point, where did Kirkbride go next? Well, the most recent game to release with credits to him is Immortals of Avum, released in 2023. And you might also be saying, what? Because I literally had never heard of this game until I started doing research for this video. Michael Kirkbride was the lead writer and story designer for this magic-based first-person shooter developed by Ascendant Studios and published by EA. And now you might be thinking, why haven't I heard of this game? And well, maybe it's because Ascendant Studios had to lay off 45 of their staff because of poor sales at release, and maybe it was unfortunately released around the same time as Baldur's Gate 3, Starfield, and Armored Core 6, and maybe just because it wasn't received very well. Both journalist and player reviews state the game is very run-of-the-mill, with a lukewarm, predictable story and boring combat. Personally, I've never played this game, not only because it costs $100 still, but because I haven't really heard of it or heard anything good about it, so I can't really leave my opinion here. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Kirkbride has also worked on many other games over the years, however these were much smaller roles, so I won't really touch on them in this video. I just find it really interesting to see the evolution in Kirkbride's career after pulling away from the Elder Scrolls. It's clear to me that he had immense creative freedom when it came to Redguard and Morrowind, and then to go to other game studios where he could potentially have been limited by the games that he worked on. It'd be really interesting to hear from Kirkbride and his own take on this, but I have a feeling we probably won't hear anything from him soon. Now, I didn't really know where to put this section into the video, so let's talk about it here at the end. As you would expect anyone who has been somewhat of a public figure on the internet over the past decade or two, there's always some controversy. And no, I'm not talking about the controversy with the lore that Kirkbride creates. Just like in my Jeremy Soule video, I want to cover this as neutrally as possible and let you, the viewer, come to your own conclusion. I just want to present the facts, or accusations, or whatever you want to call it. I'm just the messenger basically, and you decide what to do with the information that I'm presenting to you. So basically, in a post made on May 9th, 2019, Tumblr user Out of Oxygen covered some allegations that many people in the Elder Scrolls community have been discussing for years regarding Kirkbride's behavior. These accusations were not all things that happened recently. Some happened in, the early 2010s, and maybe even earlier than that. To directly quote the post, Kirkbride was accused of: number 1, transphobic and all-around rude comments to a transsexual man. Number 2, posting a game cover of a fake game called Call of Duty Ferguson. Number 3, playing Vivek and Azura, among others, in a roleplay where he calls her a he-she bitch and symbolically her with a spear. Number 4, got into an internet disagreement that ended up with him sketching a large insect drawing blood from a penis and explained that it represented his opponent. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Number 5, depicting Orsimer as caricatures of Asian men. Number 6, the whole Queen Irene / Kinmune was his robot OC from the future, i.e. that she was Kinmune from the Coda. Number 7, drew something that he described as an Almcivi Cronenberg fuck form. And number 8, places emphasis upon intersex beings and sexual abuse in his writing. The post delves more into the details of each point, and I will leave it linked down below because it's quite long if you wish to read it yourself. It basically boils down to people criticizing him for being transphobic, racist, glamorizing sexual violence, being inappropriate, and the worst crime of all, saying that Queen Irene is Kinmune and Coda is canon. I'm sorry, I don't mean to joke about that. I really don't want to downplay everything else, the severity of— oh, I'm sorry, oh my god. Yeah. This controversy has led to him being called out over the years and has made him public enemy number 1 for the Elder Scrolls community on Tumblr, and possibly other platforms too. I'm unsure if Kirkbride has responded to any of this criticism ever, so I can't share his perspective on it. Another point of contention is the allegations that Kirkbride's fans have harassed and attacked others for openly criticizing the works of Coda. Again, I'm just relying on this information being recounted by these Tumblr users, so I can't actually find the direct source of this. Again, it's unclear whether any of this has been directly addressed by Kirkbride, but in an unrelated post on a Reddit thread, Kirkbride detailed his path to sobriety and stated that he apologizes to anyone who knew him in 2013 to 2015, or even earlier, because he recognizes that he said and did things that he does not condone. It's unclear what this is directly a reference to, however, I do believe Kirkbride is aware of his poor past behaviors in his life. Well, that's a nice way to end a video, I guess. This has been another interesting topic for me to cover that many people haven't really talked about in the past. I've been wanting to make this video for a while, so I'm glad I finally got to get it out. So what are your guys' thoughts on Kirkbride? There's definitely no doubt that his contribution in writing helped skyrocket the Elder Scrolls series to its success, and how deeply invested people are with the lore still to this day. My feelings on him are mixed, however, I did find that some of my favorite aspects in the lore were actually some of his works. I didn't come to realize this until much later in my Elder Scrolls journey, so I guess that says something about his creative potential. He definitely lost me at Coda though, I will say that at the least, and I do not condone any of his poor behavior in the past if those accusations are true. As always, my sources are linked below in the description. Links to my Twitter, Discord, and my Ko-Fi if you want to leave a donation are linked down below. Please be sure to leave a like if you like this video, leave a comment if you didn't like this video and tell me why, and subscribe to see more. Thanks for watching guys, and have a good one.